What's going on, guys? I appreciate you tuning in to another episode of Crush's 5-Minute Finds. In today's episode, thanks to the kindness and generosity of two dead set champions, we're talking Hasbro's WWF action figure line, a line that was a big part of my childhood and a toy line that really captured the spirit of the colourful and cartoony era of wrestling in the early 90s that exploded through toy aisles. And like I've mentioned previously, as I get deeper into the later waves of the line, it's a toy line that's getting really tricky to track down here in Australia, which makes me all the more appreciative to the two legends that have hooked me up with the two figures we're going to be talking about today. So I've got two figures to share with you guys, and they're both based on the kind of gimmick heavy characters that were prevalent in the WWF in the early 90s and the kind of characters that make great Hasbros. So we start with a Series 5 1993 release with this fella right here, Skinner, a figure that Phil from Treasures for Trigger was kind enough to send my way. So a big thanks to Phil, I really do appreciate it, mate. But Skinner was portrayed by Steve Keirn, who for the older wrestling fans is most notable as one half of the Fabulous Ones with Stan Lane, a tag team that won tag titles in all sorts of territories before Steve Keirn made his debut in the WWF as Skinner in 1991, and it's the Skinner character that this guy is way more memorable for me, you know, being a fan of very late 80s but early 90s wrestling. And the Skinner character was kind of depicted as a down and dirty alligator wrangler from the Florida Everglades, and this figure is actually, in my opinion, a pretty good representation of that character. You've got all the elements of his, you know, ring attire well covered there. The hat is sculpted on. Unfortunately, it's not an accessory, even though I think it would make a great removable accessory. The other accessory that I think this figure could have been released with is something that maybe it's more of a personal memory for me, but I always remember Skinner coming down to the ring with the alligator paw on the necklace, and there's other Hasbros that were released with those necklace accessories like Razor Ramon and Papa Shango, so that would have been a possible one. But the alligator paw is one that sticks in my mind because I remember, you know, as a young fella going up to far north Queensland on a family trip and going to a souvenir store and buying a crocodile paw on a leather strap because, you know, it made me think of Skinner. So anyway, that's a personal memory for me. But, you know, a really good figure in my opinion, has all the elements of Skinner's ring attire well covered. The action feature is an interesting one. It's one that was only used on 2 or 3 other figures, and you can either push the feet up to, you know, get the arms swinging for punches, or you can use the arms as a bit of a lever for some foot stomps. So an action feature that was only used for a couple of other figures if my memory serves me correct. Now, like I said, this figure was released in 1993 and Skinner must have been close to or at the end of his run with the WWF at that time. I remember Skinner competing in the 1993 Royal Rumble, the first pay-per-view of the year, and I think that was it. But definitely a no-brainer for the Hasbro line, even though Skinner was a mid-carder at best. In my memory, you know, the way I look back on it, he definitely carved out a respectable spot on the roster. Skinner competed for the Intercontinental title, ultimately being defeated by Bret Hart at this Tuesday in Texas. So certainly had his moments, had a nice run for a couple of years in the WWF, and just makes a great Hasbro. So an awesome one for the collection. Phil, thank you very much once again, mate. I really do appreciate it. And then we have another figure which has also proven really elusive with Nailz, a figure that was generously gifted to me by my mate Enzo. A big thanks to Enzo. Just like Skinner, Nailz was released in 1993, but he was one of the later Series 7 releases. So Hasbro were just pumping out wave after wave in 1993. So yeah, Nailz, a Series 7, he's one of the yellow card figures, which are definitely not the easiest to track down. So thanks once again to Enzo, and I love this figure. In my opinion, we've got a fantastic representation of the Nailz character. We've got a fantastic head sculpt. That face is an excellent capture, in my opinion, for this era of action figures. The hair is spot on. We've got that short blonde hair parted down the middle. The prison jumpsuit is captured beautifully. Now, as you're probably aware if you're watching this, Nailz was very much like a one-dimensional character that was built around the gimmick of an ex-con, and he was essentially just brought into the WWF for the purpose of feuding with the big boss man, who, you know, a character that was based around the gimmick of a corrections officer. So Yeah, that prison jumpsuit's captured great, and again, like, in my opinion, the figures that make the best Hasbros are the ones that have distinctive outfits, distinctive face paints that are colourful. You know, in my opinion, they're the ones that make the best Hasbros, and I think we've got a really good example here with Nailz. The play feature is a pretty straightforward one. We've just got an uppercut there, like a spring-loaded uppercut. In my opinion, one area in which this figure could have been improved would be a better gripping hand. We've got a slightly open hand there, in my opinion, and I'll explain. I think this should have had the closed gripping hand that some of the other figures had. And that's because although Nailz wasn't released with an accessory or a weapon, I think Nailz's hand should have been sculpted in a way that he could hold the Big Boss Man's nightstick, because Nailz, like I've mentioned, is a character and therefore a figure that will be always closely tied with the Big Boss Man. So if Nailz wasn't released with a nightstick, he certainly should have had the proper gripping hand to be able to hold on to that. But aside from that, I can't fault this figure. It's incredible. But Nailz did have an exceptionally short run in the WWF. From what I remember, he debuted very early in 1992. He had some notable matches on pay-per-view throughout 1992, which was a big year for my wrestling fandom because it was the year that I discovered wrestling and was all in and obsessed straight away. But from what I recall, by the end of 1992, Vince McMahon had actually fired, he'd, terminated the contract of Nailz after they had some sort of confrontation over a personal dispute, and Nailz assaulted Vince McMahon. So before the end of 1992, Nailz is gone from the WWF, yet this figure comes out in 1993. So that's certainly an interesting one. With that said, the Nailz character does not end when his contract with the WWF ends, because Nailz and the Big Boss Man actually took their feud onto the independent circuit. And a personal story from my childhood, I was lucky enough in June of 1993, so almost exactly 30 years ago, to go to a local wrestling show here in Sydney called Wrestle Riot, and the card was headlined by a singles bout between Road Warrior Animal and Demolition Smash, so that was awesome for me as a 9-year-old, just loving it. But the bout prior to the main event was the Big Boss Man versus Nailz in some small arena in Sydney, and it was just awesome. So, and that makes this figure all the more special. So once again, thank you, Enzo. I really do appreciate Nailz. I can't wait to get Nailz and Skinner on the shelf. But with that, that is the end of this video. I hope I've not gone too far over 5 minutes. But look, a big thanks once again to Enzo and to Phil. I really do appreciate you boys. I'll put a link down below in the description to Phil's YouTube channel. Highly recommend you go check out Treasures for Trigger. Phil produces great videos, and he's an even better bloke, and I strongly encourage you guys to support him if you're not already doing so. I'll also include a link in the description to Enzo's Instagram. Enzo's got a fantastic collection, and I definitely recommend you jumping on his Instagram and giving him a follow. So thanks very much to those boys, and thanks to you lot as well. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope to hear from you in the comments, or as always, you can hit us up on Instagram at Crusher Collects. But that is it. I'll leave you to it, and until the next one, cheers.